Okay, so we'll call to order the regular council meeting of Tuesday, May 12th. Apologize for the slight delay due to technical difficulties. Just a quick reminder to all meeting participants that if you're not speaking, please keep your microphone on mute so we're not picking up a whole lot of background noise. And if you wish to speak, please use the raise hand function or type it into the group chat, and we'll put you in some speaking and put you in speaking order. Just as we get going, I'd like to acknowledge that we are pleased to be here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The city of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We're all treaty people. So we have a fairly good agenda in front of us today. Are there any changes to the agenda? I know there's one.
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration has one amendment for consideration for council to the agenda, an addition of item 14A, closed session regarding project planning. Thank you.
Okay, we'll add item 14A. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Councillor Hendricks.
So moved, Your Worship.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion. Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to see if we could just check the minutes again for the location. If I'm not mistaken, when I last read it, unless it was caught by the administration since then, it said council chambers, and we were definitely on a Zoom call.
Okay, we'll note that when we get to that item. Just looking to approve the agenda as presented, as amended.
I'm sorry, jumped ahead with the consent agenda. My
You did.
bad.
And there's only one item on the consent agenda, so we're just going to skip it and do it as it comes up. But yeah,
I'm ahead of myself.
all in favor of approving the agenda as presented, approving the agenda as amended, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Thank you. As I said before, we only have one item on the consent agenda today, so we're just gonna skip it and hit it when we get there. There are no open forums today, which leads us to item 5A, adoption of the minutes. Is there a member of council prepared to move the minutes? And then Councillor Barnhart had a question.
So moved.
Councillor Danlick moves. Councillor Barnhart.
Sorry about that, guys. The location on the minutes says the council chambers, and we were on a Zoom call for those minutes. So I would just like to amend those minutes.
Okay, we'll amend them as noted. Any further discussion on the minutes? Councillor Hendricks.
Your Worship, regarding 200421, page 2. If I could take you to the motion by Councillor Van Newkirk. In terms of voting, Councillor Bill Danlick.
Oh, he's missing, yeah.
Sorry, guys, I missed that myself. Sorry. Thanks, Barry.
I got your back, sir. I got your back.
Well, right now it shows as a tie, which means it failed.
That's where I was. I said, okay, how did it move ahead?
No worries. It happens. All right. Any further discussion? Approve the minutes as amended. All in favor, say aye.
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 Carries unanimously.
Aye.
There are no public hearings today, which gets into item 7A, really weighty subject matter today. The auditor's report. Grant Thornton, open it up to administration. Anytime you're ready, Mr. Blanco.
It appears they're muted.
Well, no.
I'll introduce the auditor. Speaking today is Megan McConnon from Grant Thornton LLP to present the audit report to council, audit strategy and results.
Cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being with us here today to share your findings. Had a brief report. It looked good, so hoping for good things today.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. I'm always on mute when I start. It's inevitable. So we'll maybe just flip through our report at a fairly high level. Please stop us at any point along the way. I do want to say thank you to Curtis and Mike and their team. They've been super helpful in getting through this audit. I know it has not been the normal anywhere. And so us torturing them remotely, I don't think was any easier this year, but we really appreciate the speed at which they got us everything. And we were able to get through our whole audit despite the remote nature. So the first page of our audit, the executive summary, just gives you an idea of what our scope and the purpose of the report is. It's really just there to assist you in doing your good governance around the audit, and also gives us a chance to tell you anything that we need to tell you about the audit. So status of the audit, we are substantially complete our audit procedures right now. What's left is really timed around today's meeting. We are still outstanding a legal letter and a couple of the kind of final last pieces that we just need signed off and wrapped up, but otherwise we are complete. And then our approach is just listed in Appendix A, and the only thing to note is it's a risk-based approach. So we can't possibly look at everything, but we do try and look at anything that we think there might be a higher level of risk and dig into those areas more. And so you'll see some of those in the results. So page 2 just talks obviously about the word of the day, COVID-19. Because you are a December year end, this is substantially note disclosure. So it is included in the financial statements just as a subsequent event. We did have a conversation with management just about the impact to the city and whether there was anything else we should be considering. And we're comfortable that at this point there isn't anything that needs to be adjusted in the financial statements, and there's no consideration of any issues sort of cash flow wise or impairment wise at December that we need to consider. Page 3 of the report just brings you to significant risks. So that talks about the 2 big risks that we always take a look at. Both of them say fraud risk, but I should note that that's just because that's an inherent risk under auditing standards around revenue and around management override, which is really journal entries. And so that is inherent in every single risk. We look at those risks in every audit. And so we do take a deeper dive around your revenues in particular, looking at water, sewer, property tax revenues, and some of the other revenue kind of non-standard revenues. And so we did some substantive testing around that. We looked at some analytical around that. We're comfortable with the results. We also do take a look at journal entries. And so we do take a look at whether they've been posted appropriately and that we're comfortable with them, and for any indications of fraud, and we were comfortable with our journal entry testing. Accounting practices, just talk a bit of some of the estimates that are included in the financial statements. We just highlight those because those are not things you can trace to an invoice. They do have some judgment in them. And so we do take a closer look at those just to be comfortable with them. And we have no concerns with the amounts of the estimates. Page 4 of this brings you to adjustments. So we didn't have any adjustments to the financial statements as a result of our audit. We do note that there was one correction that was made in the current year just to recognize some revenue that actually should have been recognized last year. And so we're just tracking that as an unadjusted item in your financial statements. So we're comfortable with that amount. It's not material to your financial statements overall. And really what's happening is just this year you're catching up with that adjustment. So page 5 just talks a bit about internal controls. There is nothing that we need to bring to your attention as a result of the audit. We have no internal control findings this year. Cybersecurity, I only highlight because it's obviously a very big concern. It was a concern before the pandemic. It is getting substantially worse, actually, is what we're seeing. It's very high risk with people working remotely. So we just bring that to your attention because we are seeing a lot more in the nature of cybersecurity and phishing attacks, and just to be aware of that as you kind of oversee the operations. Independence, we're just confirming to you that we continue to be independent of the city. We have no relationships that need to be brought to your attention with regards to the services that we provide. We did provide some non-audit services in the year that wrapped up, just with relation to our advisory team, doing some work on the daycare and doing some work on that, but that was a completely separate team. So we did safeguard our independence between us and as auditors and the advisory team. Technical updates, not too exciting right now in the world of PSAS, which is good. There's a few things happening, but not a lot. Also, not a lot of changes under the assurance and auditing standards that we need to bring to your attention. It's been a busy couple of years for the all of the accounting standards people, and they seem to be taking a break this year. They're even deferring some of the standards, which is very unusual for them. And that just brings you to the appendices, which is really more detail. The only thing I'll highlight in there is the draft auditor's report, which is a clean opinion that we anticipate signing kind of once we wrap up those last few things in the status of the audit that we have. And the rest, I won't drag you through all of the detail. If you can't get to sleep, all of the standard snippets are at the end for a late night read. And I'm happy to answer any questions at all about the audit.
Oh, appreciate that, and appreciate all the hard work you've done for us over the years, and of course this year as well. Just a quick note to those that are following along at home: if you wish to see the report, it's included in the agenda package, which you can access through a link on both our YouTube and Facebook Live pages as we're going through this meeting. But I was really gratified to see that there wasn't too many serious concerns brought up, and that things were working really well. And so once again, thank you, and thank you to our staff for their high levels of hard work that have kept us in this position. And so I'll open it up to members of council for questions on the audit as it stands. Councillor Hendricks.
Your Worship, thank you. Just some minor things. So maybe we'll start with some housekeeping on the page following page 6, R17 to 77. Just a role of town council. Given that we've switched over to city status now, so
apologies, missed that.
No, I'm just gonna go what I got here. I had a question on the landfill and the obligations that you've noted in your appendixes, and let me just get to that. Could you just walk us through that a little bit in terms of liability and where we sit today?
Yeah, for sure. And I will defer a little bit to Curtis because he probably has a better handle on all of the exact numbers than I do. But we do take a look at the amount of the liability that sits there for remediation in the future. And obviously that's a fairly large estimate because that doesn't come into play until the landfill is actually complete and closed and you have to do remediation work. So that is based on it's based on a rather complicated calculation, usually involving some engineering reports around what the status, the life of the landfill is, how much the costs are going to be when you close it. And so that gets updated whenever the kind of engineering assessment gets updated. And Curtis, I'm scrolling frantically because I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I don't know if you happen to have them.
So it's noted in note 10 to the financial statements, which is on page 19. Sorry, I don't have which number of the agenda package that is. The number recorded is 1.9 million,
right,
based on those estimates noted before.
Okay. And to that, how does the city of Beaumont react to that? Is it setting up a separate line item for it, or is this strictly under the authority and the authority has its own accounting assessment of this? How does it work?
So you actually have this liability recorded in your books as as the city's piece of this, right?
Right.
So the landfill will also, the Waste Management Authority will also have its own accounting for the landfill as a whole. And so we do feed off of their assessment to help generate that. So they are somewhat tied.
Okay, so I was in a meeting some years ago when it was still a commission before it became an authority. And one of the concerns was the public liability or the personal liability that was attached to councillors as a result of acting. And a previous auditor had a note to reader with respect to that issue. Obviously, we've come from there to the authority piece. Is there any other exposure to us as individual councillors at this point?
So, I mean, that's a bit of a legal question. I will say that I have not heard of any concerns with that, especially because it's a separate entity at this point, a separate legal entity. I mean, I don't want to guarantee that obviously because I'm not a lawyer by trade, but that is sort of the purpose of having a separate authority.
Right, yeah, so we are, all the groups that were tied to the commission were brought into a meeting with legal teams to explain that to us, and suggested we should all be carrying personal liability insurance as a result at that time. I'm just making sure that, you know, it hasn't been lost in the translation between commission to authority. And given the liabilities and the numbers that are staring at us today, you know, how does that play out that way? So that would be my question. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's probably more of a legal
Okay.
question around usually that's covered by insurance in general.
Yeah. So in the past, we would
So,
take out
yeah.
personal liability insurance.
Yeah.
I was told in this term I didn't have to, but I just want to make sure that we're covered off. So maybe our admin team can give us an answer to that at some point. So that'd be great. Thank you. One other question, HST, do we have any HST that we look after here?
The provincial,
Well,
just GST.
Yeah, GST.
We do have some, yep.
Page item 24 on our page 26 just speaks to some HST. So I was just curious as to whether or not there was any HST looked after by the city of Beaumont.
I can speak to that. No, we mostly just deal with GST. There is no HST.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to the presenter, and forgive me while I just get these documents all in a row. I'm managing too many screens at once. Just quickly, wanted to go to Appendix D, which actually surprised me that this was in Appendix D because it's the bit that's in fact, oh, is it D? No, I beg your pardon. It's C, Appendix C, Draft Independent Auditor's Report. This surprised me that it's an appendix because it's then addressed to the Mayor and members of the Council and City of Beaumont, which, so it's the main bit addressed to us as far as I can tell. And the question I wanted to raise was, and again, I'm going to have to try and find this. There's a reference to the business being, the municipality being treated as a going concern. As a going concern and not being, I'm trying to find the wording. There was some that stuck out to me as not being liquidated or wound up. Now, my background's not accountancy or finance, so can you just explain to me what difference that makes, how that's significant to the audit?
Absolutely. So I will highlight that this report right here that's addressed to the Mayor and Council, this is what will ultimately get attached to the financial statements. So this is our audit report on the financial statements. So this is very standardized wording. Accountants and auditors use the exact same phrasing for their auditors' reports to have consistency in between. Very rarely do you see additional wording in there that usually is a specific extra paragraph. So one of the requirements under all of the accounting standards is that the accounting standards are related to organizations that are in ongoing business. So ones that are not going bankrupt, that are not being shut down. You must be continuing as a going concern to use the regular, normal accounting standards to report your financial statements under. So the reason our audit report specifies that is that there is judgment around going concern, whether an organization will continue on. And so we specify that because that is the only way we can say that you are in accordance with the accounting standards, is if you are continuing as a going concern. In an organization that is not a going concern, there's a separate form of accounting called liquidation accounting. And so that would be as if you were trying to sell all your assets on the market at that point in time. It is extremely rare. Most of the time what happens is if an organization is struggling and there is an uncertainty about its ability to continue, there'll be note disclosure in the financial statements and in the report. but it is an actual requirement of our accounting standards that we can only report if an organization is a going concern and that we're comfortable with them.
Okay, thank you. How can I ask another question? There's a line of questioning I wanted to pursue here just a little bit. So how would you know? What would be the signs that the organization was no longer a going concern, even though perhaps it thought it was or wanted to appear so?
So we look for a variety of different indicators. So if we are seeing payables that are aging, if we are seeing receivables that are not being collected, that starts to be a trigger. If we are, we do ask for usually budgets and cash flows so that we can evaluate after the period after year end. So we actually are required by our standards to consider a minimum period of 12 months after the year end to determine whether there is sufficient cash flows to continue. So if we have a significant concern, we obviously dig into those cash flows a little bit more deeply. If it is not a significant concern, either because we can see that there are sufficient current assets to cover the current liabilities and we can see ongoing cash flows coming in as we do our work, then we don't necessarily dig as much into it. I don't know if that answers the question, but.
Yes, I think it does, or at least where I was going with this is are reserves a factor here? Does, for instance, would one of the signs be that the reserves are inadequate?
It could be. It would be dependent on what you needed to use those reserves for and whether you had significant requirements that you were unable to meet with those reserves. So one fairly common situation that can happen in often more the for-profit world is that you undertake a large construction project. You're building a new building for your business. If you don't have sufficient funding for that building, that can raise questions for us that we may then dig into whether you can generate sufficient funding to finish the building. In this case, if the city had insufficient reserves to fund something or inability to get additional funding for a large construction project, we would start asking some questions about the plans for that.
Okay, and in fact, thank you. That's an interesting example because we are in fact funding a large new building, and the question has come up as to whether reserves are adequate or not going forward. And I just want, and from what you're telling me, that the business does, that the municipality does constitute a going concern from the auditor's accountant's definition, then that suggests that, well, you didn't find the reserves were inadequate. I'll put it that way.
We didn't find significant concerns for the next year. We'll put it that way,
Yes.
Because we don't necessarily dig into how the exact details of how a project is going to be financed as it rolls forward. That is an operational concern more than an audit concern, because we are unfortunately past looking primarily, looking at your historical information.
Okay, thank you. I'll cede the floor.
Councilor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. And a question for you, Megan.
Yes.
First of all, thank you very much for the work you've been doing over the years. And I do appreciate that we have a clean audit. And so my question is one to educate myself and others. It's very odd to me that we have on page 14, adjustments and uncorrected misstatements. And it looks like there, I don't know if there's a disagreement between the management and yourselves, or what that sentence underneath the chart really means. So I just am curious. There's too many negatives in that whole page, and I keep trying to make the logic out of it, and it's not working.
Absolutely.
So,
this is one of those weird accounting things. So I apologize. So uncorrected misstatements are items that come up that are not corrected in the financial statements, and there's multiple reasons for that. So in this particular case, to correct this particular error would have required restating your prior year's figures, because the revenue was recorded in this year, but actually belongs to last year. So we go back and forth and have discussions with management. In theory, as auditors, we're required to ask that it be adjusted. In practicality, restating prior year figures for a dollar amount that's clearly not significant to the financial statements is not practical. So they have not been adjusted because from a practical perspective, it does not make sense to restate the prior year. But we are required as auditors to consider asking management whether they will do that. And obviously in this case, it did not make sense.
So in plain language, that means not to worry.
Not to worry. This is a reasonable adjustment to still have there. It was a reasonable fix. We're comfortable with it as auditors.
It's an accounting just.
It's a timing issue. It's a timing issue only. So, and it's fixed now in the statement, so it won't carry forward.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome.
All right, seeing no further requests to speak, once again, thank you very much for all the hard work and effort that you put in. It's always nice to
Thank
see
you.
it. Can I get a member of council to move that we accept this report as information, please?
So moved, Your Worship.
Councillor Stout. Discussion on the motion? All right. Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Carries unanimously. Thanks very much, Megan, for all your hard work. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's very nice to see you all online.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to item 8A, 2019 2019 audited consolidated financial statements. As we go through this line item, just for council's approval, we have three motions that we're going to be making. That council adopt the 2019 audited consolidated financial statements as presented, that council transfer the 2019 operating surplus of $470,521 to the Township 505 Land Debenture Payment Fund, and the council transfer the 2019 solid waste and wastewater net surplus to the respective utility reserve accounts to the amount of $528K, $325K respectively, and approve a transfer from the water reserve in the amount of $255.78 to cover the deficit. Anyway, turn it over to admin, but that's the three things we're doing with this item.
Thank you to your worship and the rest of council. As mentioned before you is a report on the 2019 consolidated financial statements, which, as you just heard, will receive a clean audit opinion. Within the report is some high-level analysis of various year-over-year variances, as well as budget to actual variances, and then a listing of some major capital additions, as well as reserve transfers. As mentioned, the overall operating surplus for 2019 came in at approximately $417,000, which approximates less than 1% of the overall operating budget. The overall surplus for utilities came at a net surplus of $597,000, which approximates the average for the past 5 years. As mentioned, at this time, admin is recommending that we transfer the operating surplus of $417,521 to the Township 505 Land Debenture Repayment Fund, and that we transfer the utility surpluses for solid waste and wastewater to their respective utility accounts, reserve accounts, and approve transfer from the water reserve to cover the net deficit in that utility, as well as approve the 2019 audited consolidated financial statements as presented. Thank you.
As we're doing three motions, we'll do questions followed by the motions. So are there questions on any of the on this agenda item by members of council? Councillor Hendricks.
Your worship, thank you. Let me just catch up here. Just back to my comments regarding the landfill, and it is tied to this document. I wanted to make sure that the previous speaker had an opportunity to speak to it. So it's page 19 of this document, or page 63 of our agenda package. So I just want to make sure that's highlighted. I believe it was Luchek and Wright who did the audit when they identified this as a potential issue. So I just, it's one of my pet issues when it comes to the audit. So thank you for allowing me to ask questions on that. And thank you for the answers on how we're handling the liability moving forward. Then on item 12 of that same page, just wanted to highlight the contractual commitments where it states the related agreement may be terminated on March 31. And of course, this is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and Services contract in any year by either party given 24 months notice prior to the date of the intended termination Total future annual costs under the terms of the agreement are estimated at $2,654,000. And I was wondering if Mr. DeBlanco could just expand on that a little bit as to what that all includes.
Through your worship to Councillor Hendricks, my understanding is that includes the amount of the contract with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Okay, so that includes for let's call it the manpower, if I'm using that correctly, in terms of staffing, the building, the operational issues that we normally cover off on costs. So we've got sort of a fixed number. I thought this was an escalating issue over time, depending on our growth and the number of staffing requirements we would have over time. Is that not correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Hendricks. Yes, that is correct. It's tied to the amount of manpower required, not necessarily the building and operating costs the city incurs, but just the contract with the RCMP themselves. Okay,
so when you say the future costs, it's got an end date before it has to be renewed. Do we know roughly what that date is?
Like as noted in the note, can be terminated on March 31st. The contract goes till 2032.
2032, thank you. Okay. Good stuff. And just one other note, just on the city contract with City of Edmonton to provide a commuter transit system from Beaumont to Century Park. Just want to confirm the 48-hour notice requirement.
Through your worship to Councillor Hendricks, I'd have to get back on the specifics, but that is what was in the agreement before. So I'm comfortable that would still be in the agreement.
Okay. So to restart that process, once we've given notice, and I believe we have gone through some notice periods at the present time because of COVID, to restart, perhaps just give us a timeline. Do we have to give them notice? Any lead time? How would we normally tackle that?
Are you talking about renewing the contract?
Well, if right now we've got I think we've got it on pause. I don't know what the exact word would be, given that we've had to pause our situation given the COVID. To restart is a phone call, or is it a notice period? Maybe just help me with what we normally could expect.
Mr. Blanco or Mr. Stephen?
All right. Yeah, the notice we gave them, if you recall, we set the date, so it was like 5 days notice or something we gave them, or a week. As far as getting it started back up, I don't know the particulars of that, but we'll find out.
Okay, thank you. That's my question. And I believe, yeah, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hendricks. We'll do Councillor Danluck, followed by Councillor Stout, Barnhart, and Van Newkirk.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. First of all, congratulations to administration and council on 1% surplus. That's not a very big number. It's very, very manageable, and job well done in the 2019 operating budget. It's a quick question. I know administration is suggesting using the money towards the 510 land purchase debenture to reduce our debt, which is a very good way to use the money. I endorse the idea. I do have a question, though, in the sense of more engaging the temperature of council in terms of, rather than putting the 417,000 into the 510 land debenture, could we not put it towards our 2020 capital budget, as we are building several rinks, looking at a multi-use football field, building a new school? Perhaps our 417,000 could be put into our capital budget for 2020. I don't think it's going to hurt us at all on the 510 debenture idea, but if council has appetite to discuss this, I'm willing to raise it. But if council doesn't think it's a good idea, I'm happy with the debenture money, the money going towards the debenture as recommended by administration. So any thoughts on that? If I could raise it, that issue, Mayor Stewart and CMLs has any thoughts of using the money in that area?
You could, and just to weigh in a little bit on it, it's a bit of robbing Peter to pay Paul, because we still have to pay that debenture. And so I
agree. I'm just suggesting
if we take that surplus and put it towards the capital plan, then the money from the capital plan that we would have borrowed will now go to pay that debenture. So it's 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other. And so I'm just happy to leave it where it sits right now. But
as I mentioned, I'm okay with it. Any suggestions from other council members?
I would just, if you don't mind, your worship, I would agree with the mayor there. We have outlined and approved a capital plan and for those, and so we've shown that we we've still got room in that capital plan. We don't need to find other money to fund those projects that we've approved in the 2020 capital plan. So I appreciate raising it, but yeah, I would suggest that it just goes straight into the debenture as recommended.
Yeah, if the debenture wasn't due this year, it might be a conversation to have, but.
Yeah, on that note, Mayor Stewart, I'm happy to withdraw the suggestion and continue with the administration's recommendation. Thank you for the discussion.
Follow up.
No, I'm good on that. For right now, no more further questions at this point. Thank you.
Hey, Councillor
Thank you, Your Worship. Let me. Sorry, I'm navigating between too many documents here. Just a quick question on the economic development amount shows it's 228.5% over budget, the actual expenditure. Could you just speak a little more detail as to why we were so far over budget on that particular item? As I noticed a lot of the others are under budget.
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Stout, the 228% is an increase, a year-over-year increase, which part of that increase would have been budgeted for in the 2019 year as part of increasing expenditures for economic development. As far as the budget overage, a portion of that pertains to a restructure of the organization as a whole. The communications department moved into that department, so there's a delta there, as well as a little bit over on program expenses.
Okay, what actual programs are we talking about?
Mine, I'd have to look back at the specifics, but my understanding is some of it is related to the COBIC, some might be ELA. I'd defer some of these questions to the Director of Economic Development and Communications. But my understanding is the majority would be from some of these one-off programs.
Okay, so it's the one-off program. All right, thank you.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just a couple of questions to Mr. DeBlanco. The first one is about revenue on the report. There's a mention of the rental income has increased by 54.6%. And I just found that kind of surprising considering that we had to close the facility, one of our facilities, for so long. So I wonder if you could just clarify for me, how did our rent actually go up?
Sure. So through your worship to Councillor Barnhart, the majority of that rental income increase came from the community center and the Ken Nickel Arena, as well as mentioned in the auditor report. There was a slight adjustment of $260K, so it would be slightly less than what is reflected in the reports at 54%. But like said before, it's mostly resultant from the arena and the community center. The closure of the rec center was later in the year, so it wouldn't be as tied to that.
So we actually had more renters actually using our facilities overall.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And my second question, thank you, is about community grants. So in the section, what's it called? Consolidated expenses by object. One of the comments there, one of the bullets is community grants increased and we're under budget. I just don't understand that. So the grants budget increased and we didn't spend 42,000.
Sure. Just to clarify that, I could have been a little more specific. The grant increase of 31,000 was year over year, and the under budget is budget to actual. The delta there on budget to actual would be for the grant that's given to the library. So there's always going to be a change from budget to actual based on the expenditures the library has. So the city matches dollar for dollar the delta between any revenue the library receives and their expenditures. The city does that in the form of an unconditional operating grant. So that's where the change of 42,000 would be.
So it wasn't a case of we had money that we could have given to community groups and we didn't do that. It was more about the where we're allocating certain expenses in the budget.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Newkirk.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Just a question for Curtis around debt limits. I just wanted to do a quick review of that to make sure I'm understanding and where we're at with that. So page 14 of the document, or 16 of 28, section 7 is debt limits. So it says our total debt limit is 62,132,000. It says our total debt is 33,794,000 with a total debt limit remaining of 28,338,000. Can you tell me, is the debenture for the land that is going to be paid off still included in there, and that will drop off this year? And secondly, can you comment on the effect of the BSRC funding on this number? Thank you. And then I'll have a follow-up.
Through your worship to Councillor Van Newkirk, the land debenture is included in that number and will be removed from that. It's the amount's been paid. It was paid in February. So that number is, the debt limit remaining would be 4.5 million higher. Sorry, I just follow up. What was the second question?
Yeah, so the debt limit, that, and then if you could comment on the BSRC funding, because it is, my specific question is the entire funding included in this math, or being that it is funded in tranches along the way, is there only portions of it funded?
Yes. So only the portions that we would have received proceeds would be included in this math, because this is as of December 31st, 2019. We received approximately 21 million of proceeds in the 2019 year with, I believe it's 8 million left to borrow in 2020. So that would be included in a future calculation.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess my point is we gained 4.5 on this number, but then we were behind 8 again. So we're actually today sitting at, whatever, 4 less than the 28. So just wanted to bring that forward and make sure that we talked about that so that everyone understood what we actually had for room there and what that number was. Thank you.
Very much. Councillor Hendricks, final questions, and then we will move into some motions.
Yeah, thank you. And just take you to page 24 of the document, or page 68 of the agenda. Just would like to know today where our split is percentage-wise, residential to commercial.
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Hendricks, that's on another calculation, but I believe the number is 92% to 8%, which was an increase of approximately a swing at approximately 1% in the right direction.
Right on.
Getting better.
Yeah.
Nice.
Just wanted to emphasize that, seeing what I saw here. So thank you. Yeah, so.
Okay, so is there a member of council willing to move that council adopt the 2019 audited consolidated financial statements as presented? Councillor Barnett. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Is there a member of council willing to move recommendation number 2? Councillor Danluck.
So moved, your worship. Thank you.
So the council will transfer the 2019 net operating surplus of 417,521 to the township 505 land debenture repayment fund. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Van Newkirk.
No.
You got your hand up, so.
Oh, my apologies.
Don't worry. Just want it, if you want to speak, now is your time. So, okay, seeing no discussion on the motion, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Carries unanimously. Is there a member of council willing to move third recommendation?
So moved, your worship.
Councillor Stout, that council transfer the 2019 solid waste and wastewater net surpluses to their respective utility reserve accounts in the amount of 528,247 and 325,104 respectively, and approved transfer from the water reserve in the amount of 255,728 to cover the net deficit. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
It carries unanimously, which brings us to item 8B. Thank you very much, Mr. DeBlanco. Appreciate all your hard work as we're slogging through COVID-19 and all the stuff we have to do to keep the municipality running in a normal fashion. Thank you very much. Item 8B, Outdoor Rinks Capital Project Public Engagement. I think this is Mr. Suter.
Good afternoon, your worship, members of council. I'm here today just to bring council up to date with where we're at with our 3 of our 2020 capital projects, the outdoor rinks that we're working on. We've been working with an engineering firm to come up with some concepts, and we're ready to go to public engagement on that. But I wanted to present it to council, just to have a look at, show you what we're kind of been working on and what the public is going to see for some feedback. I'm going to try to share my screen here, and hopefully this will go off without a hitch. Bear with me. I'm going to start with the Bellevue replacement project, Bellevue Outdoor Rink. Concept number 1 that we're looking at. Can everyone see here?
We can't see it yet, Paul. Sorry, mate.
Hang on. What did I do wrong?
Can't see it yet.
We'll get it sorted out.
Sorry.
No worries.
Oh, hang on. Okay, here we go. Bellevue, sorry, Bellevue concept 1. Let's see if this works.
There we go.
There we go. Everyone see that now?
Beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you can look at the picture here, I'll just give you a little detail. There's a line that goes around the rink, which measures 180 by 80. That is kind of a faint gray line. That is the existing footprint of the rink. So concept number 1 is basically just a little bit smaller. I'm not sure dimension-wise if it's a few feet or not. I don't know the existing offhand. This also incorporates some concrete walks and some asphalt for the Zamboni out of the rink shack, as well as just giving the public some more access to the parking lot at the top of the diagram there. So it's basically improving the surrounding area and almost replacing the size. That is concept number 1. I'm going to try to move to concept 2 here. Okay, everyone see concept number 2. It's configured the same way. It's a smaller rink, 150 by 65 feet. So it takes up much less footprint around both away from the condos to the west, as well as away from the Bellevue School. And concept number 3 is the same dimensions as concept number 2, except it's now facing north-south. What this does, it potentially allows for a couple issues to be addressed. Some of the issues that we have heard in the past was errant pucks going to the west and to the residents, as well as the school has some drainage concerns, and it's also very close to the existing school, as well as they do get puck damage on the school building as well. So this option 3 does allow the school to expand their play area there to the east of the footprint of the rink, as well as their drainage concerns that they were looking at resolving this year. We're trying to work with them as we move forward on this concept. So again, we're going to present to both our stakeholders and to the public at large the 3 different concepts for Bellevue. Your worship, did you want to have me just go all through the 3 different sites, or did you want to have any questions at this time on this?
No, we'll just go through all 3 sites and then we'll consolidate the questions into one, because I imagine some of the questions will be similar for all 3 projects, or all 3 sites.
And Paul, sorry, your worship, Paul, if you could just clarify, you're not looking for feedback from council now, you're just sharing these concepts, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm just looking to show you what we're going to go to the public with, so you get the first look at it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll move to Ken Nickel. So this diagram illustrates a full 200 feet by 85 rink, which is a traditional NHL, if you will, size rink. It is a large rink for an outdoor rink, that's for sure. But the engineer or architect wanted to show us what could fit there potentially. You'll also see some asphalt trails that would be there. And it does allow for a U12 size soccer field to be retained on the site. Currently, that soccer field is a little larger, but it runs east and west. This would turn it north-south, still allow it to be used. Of course, it's been out of commission for a number of years now, when the school had some portables on there, I believe, and some other stuff going on with their construction. So this would be concept number 1. It also has asphalt trails bringing you off the parking lot, and some concrete walkways, I believe, to get you to the rink. Concept number 2. It's just a smaller version, 180 by 80. Other than that, it's really the same. What it does do is gives a little more opportunity for the grading to be addressed there. It's not quite elevated there compared to the Ken Nickel in the school. If you go walk that grounds, you'll see it's quite a grade from the field surface now down. So I think they were trying to incorporate a bit more of a gradual drainage there. So those are the 2 concepts that we're going to go out with for the Ken Nickel. And now we'll move to the park area just east of Dansville. So concept number 1 is a 180 by 80 foot rink running north-south. And there will be an asphalt connection into the parking lot. So it fits on that footprint quite well. And concept number 2 is a little different twist. It's a smaller 150 by 65 surface. They've angled it a bit. They've also included what they're calling phased 2 or 3, depending on what we wanted to do or could manage to do, with a plaza. They call it a little concrete circle, as well as the option to consider of a skate activity pad, which would basically be a recreational free skate space that would not conflict with any other activities going on in the boarded rink. I thought that was an interesting concept that they felt some liberty to throw in there because there's the space available, and maybe offer some other options for the school use as well. So we'll go out and we'll see what kind of feedback we get on that. There was a lot of discussion around the sizing of these rinks, and at the end of the day, it will come down, I think, to cost more than anything. Obviously, the smaller you go, the concrete is expensive to do it properly, so that these facilities will last and be used for seasons as much as they can, as well as last for a long time. So we like to do this properly, but of course, the larger you build something, the more expensive it is. So we'll see what kind of feedback we get from the public and our stakeholders. We'll tweak whatever designs need to be tweaked, and we'll come back to you, and then it'll go out for construction tender. And with that, I think I can answer some questions. I don't have anything specific on construction methodology or real specifics yet, because we're very preliminary. Today it was just presented to council for, just so you see what we're going to go public with. So thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah, no, and we do appreciate that, and we recognize that these are high level concepts, and we're not going to get into how this is going to be constructed and when. But I do have a quick question as I'm looking at some of this. These concepts were all put together with the current budgets in mind, correct? Like, we can afford to do these. We're not going out with something that we're going to come back to public in 11. We're going to have to add money to the budget.
Your Worship, I can't answer that definitively at this time. No, not until we get some pricing back when we put it out. I just know that the larger they are, the more expensive they're going to be when you start guessing as to what the construction cost will be, especially with those concrete pads.
Yeah, and we start adding trails and plazas and skate pads and things like that cost.
Yeah. We can phase anything. We can phase the trails. We can phase shelters, players' benches. We can phase that skate activity pad. That can all be done over time. We can work off of these plans and do it every year, depending. Obviously, there's some cost savings if you do more at once, but we'll see what we get.
Yeah, because that was actually my next question, is how much of this can be phased, because once again, I'm, as much as these are great plans, I don't really foresee council approving a budget increase, but I've been wrong before. So, but anyway, I'll open it up to questions from members of council. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of real high-level questions. So on these facilities, all of them, there had been discussion around the basketball hoops at the ends, like being included so that they're multi-use. Is that still contemplated in these designs, or is that a question we were going to go to the public with? Or just wondering if you could comment to that, Mr. Suter.
Through your worship to Councilor Van Newkirk, yes, those have been something we've entertained. They're not illustrated on the diagrams, but we'll definitely have that as part of the feedback.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then just a detail item, the skate activity pad, it might be helpful to even just include the diameter of that thing, just to give people an opportunity of scale. I think you've done a good job of scaling the hockey rink and stuff, just to add a little bit to it. So that would be my comment right now. I'll wait to hear what others have to say. Thank you.
Councillor Danlock, followed by Councillor Hendricks, followed by Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Great job, Paul, on these concepts. It really gives some really good food for thought. I'm especially interested in the Bellevue option 3 to turn the rink completely in a different direction and offer the school some more space for playgrounds. It does make the rink smaller, I realize that, but it is a very creative way of solving some issues with the recent local neighbors, as well as with the school itself too. So if that was your idea, great job. It was their idea. Well, take credit for it, because I think it's quite a unique concept to do that option 3 for Bellevue. And I do like the other options you've got for Ken Nickel and Dancero as well too. So this is really good work to see some very creative thinking. Thank you. Of course, price will dictate what happens, of course, but right now conceptually, there's some good options here.
Councillor Hendricks. Thank you very much, Councillor Danlock.
Yes, Your Worship, just a couple minor things. One is on the drawings themselves, if we could get a north arrow showing somewhere on each one, I think would help people kind of.
Top right hand corner.
Okay, so am I blocked by that perhaps?
Don't know, but the ones I'm looking at show it in the top right hand corner.
Okay, so the one I've got doesn't have it. So, okay, so that's there. So thank you. Perhaps our video is covering portions of that. So good news. Secondly, in terms of costs, I would suggest that given today's market and the need for construction to keep people, working, prices today will generate a very good number. So look forward to that getting out, and it'll be our best shot, no matter what, in the last 5 or 10 years, without question. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. Councillor Barnhart, final comments?
Thank you, Your Worship, and good work on this. And a question to Mr. Suter: is it too soon for me to ask what actually the stakeholder engagement might look like? Do you have any details? Is this going to be on the city's website? Is it going to be a newspaper? Like, what is the plan, or is that still to be developed?
Your Worship, to Councillor Barnhart, yeah, we're going to do it in a variety of ways. We do have some identified stakeholders, obviously, on some of these sites, so we'll engage them directly, as well as residents that may be affected in the direct neighborhoods, and also on social media and the website. We're working on that now.
Okay, I think we should push it out as much as we can, because I think this is good stuff and people will want to say, have their say. So I look forward to seeing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further requests to speak, because a member of council prepared to move, we accept this as information.
So moved, Your Worship.
Councillor Danlock, so moved. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Carries unanimously. Which brings us to item 8C, Mayor Stewart's notice of motion. So I'll let Ms. Winter introduce it, and then I will speak to it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to members of council and the public, in accordance with the meeting procedures bylaw, once a notice of motion is made, it'll be placed on the next regular meeting. At the April 28th, 2020 council meeting, Mayor Stewart made the following notice of motion: that council direct administration to develop a land development and purchasing strategy, including a policy that would outline under what conditions or circumstances the city would seek to purchase properties and or service land. Administration is looking for direction from council today on how they wish to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so just to set the stage as to where this motion is coming from, I'll move it, then I'll speak to it. I'd like to move that council direct administration to develop a land development and purchasing strategy, including a policy that would outline under what conditions or circumstances the city would seek to purchase properties and or service land. Well, as you all know, council has spent over the couple of years doing all sorts of all of our structural plans. We got new MDPs. We have a new CARP, Central Area Redevelopment Plan. And so those have some very high, lofty goals. And so certain things like the land around City Hall being turned into a district that's for city use. Can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I apologize. But we have to start to being able to incorporate how and when we're going to buy these lands to sort of start executing the city's portion of these plans. And what sort of spurred this on is I received a letter from a resident asking the city to purchase its property because it fell within that district. And so then I sat down with the CAO and we started to discuss when, how, and what to bring to council about this. And we found out that we have very little purchasing. We don't have a policy on this. And so we don't have a policy from council on when it comes to council, what we would purchase, how we would purchase it. Do we set up a reserve fund for it? And then the CEO and I started to discuss it, and we've run into this situation before. We had that piece of land in Centreville that came up 2 years ago that didn't get done. We're having issues surrounding school sites and having to acquire property for that and things like that. And so it was felt that before we try to deal with any of these one-offs, that perhaps it would be a good idea for council to put some time, energy, and thought into developing a policy upon how we want to handle land purchases to achieve the goals of council. And so that's what led to this motion today, and this ask of council to have admin and council develop this policy so that we can execute on our vision. I open it up now to questions from my colleagues. Councillor Hendricks.
And I should have, I guess, taken my hand down, but while it hands up, I'll answer. Yes, over the years, it's sort of always been a one-off. We've had opportunities like the 80-acre piece showed up as a result of the potential annexation at that time. And there's been some others, including some of the stuff downtown and what have you. It's always been a one-off. There's always been a case made for it and then brought forward, and then the council of the day made a decision. But if there was a strategy, but it's linked to something, if there's a long-term goal, the ultimate need to have land to look after some of the strategic requirements of the community. Take, for example, where the Public Works facility is sitting today. Again, that was a one-off discussion with Leduc County. There's been some stuff even to the, let's call it to 510 and 241. There was a piece of land in there that was being discussed at one point as a potential site for some other needs for the community. So if there's a strategic goal line and how do you get there, and that's tied through a strategic plan and a policy, which starts putting money aside to get you to that point, yeah, I'd be all for that. So.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this motion is intended to help us start developing, is that policy and that strategic plan.
Yep.
Comments. Councillor Daniluk, followed by Councillor Monkoff-Swain, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. I understand the objective of the motion. I think I'm on board mostly based on the discussion, but one question I might have is that if we have a structured policy, does it take away our ability to be nimble on the spot, and should an opportunity come up to get some land at a good price or land at a strategic location, would a policy bind our hands or slow down our process to be nimble and acquire that on a one-off type situation where we could act quickly as a one-off as opposed to having an actual structure or policy? Just a observation point, not really a criticism of the idea. Just I don't want to lose our chance to be nimble. Just something come up in the future as a opportunity we want to take advantage of as a council. Just an observation more than a question, really.
That would be the kind of thing that we would want to build into the policy as we develop it. It's not necessarily going to be precluded by this, but an aid in that, exactly doing that type of thing.
Okay, thank you for that. No further question at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Monkoff-Swain.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Appreciate you bringing the notice of motion forward. A couple of questions from me. Whenever I'm looking at this, I'm trying to see any of these notice of motions. Are we doing something? Maybe not wrong, but are we looking to improve on something that we're doing? So I found that all the examples that Councillor Hendricks has brought up, when these situations arise, they're brought to council and we vote on them and we move forward. So I think that process has been working. So this one, you kind of, yes, I get understanding having a policy there, but you know, and we don't want to get into the details, but like someone's going to have to act on that policy. And so is there going to be, like, is your vision for this, like having a dedicated person or someone part-time dedicated within administration to kind of actively look for these type of opportunities? I'm just, I'm not sure what this would do differently than what we're doing today.
Well, it's going to actually set that framework to help council decide if it's something that admin needs to bring or if they can just turn it down. Because if it's something, if it's a piece of property that's within like the carp next to City Hall that we're going to need to purchase eventually, and it comes up, is that something that they bring? Or when I would say yes. Or if it's a piece of property that's out in the middle of Colonial that we don't need for anything, do they bring that, or can they turn that down on their own, sort of thing? And so it's basically just trying to put a framework around and some strategic guidance around what they bring. And so it's not going to preclude the one-offs, but if we're going to go purchase property to build things like another rec center and we can't get it through MR, or we're going to build some additions onto City Hall, how do we acquire that property? When do we acquire that property? And what are the triggers that would bring that to us, rather than having to deal with it as a one-off all the time? Basically, it would put some structure around council's thoughts in the matter on acquiring land to execute the vision. Yeah,
and I totally get that conversation. You know, part of this for me seems like a bigger picture council discussion, decision, kind of aligning with our kind of strategic objectives. And I'm trying to figure out, do we solve this by, you know, implementing the policy, or is this something that when we go forward and look at our strategic objectives, that, you know, council wants administration to focus on acquiring this? Obviously, we all know the problem highlighted in our people, places, and play report. So I totally get this situation. I'm just curious if this is the way to do it versus having the discussion, you know, to figure out what are our priorities. I mean, obviously we're asking administration to do a lot, and I was just trying to figure out where that kind of weighs in, and not being able to compare it to anything else in terms of priorities. I guess that's what I'm not like, I think it's the right thing to do for us to be able to put this in. I'm just curious on by putting in a notice of motion versus having it as part of our strategic planning discussion, are we kind of just adding it on top without thinking it within the priorities? So just more general comments, and to see if others or yourself obviously have thoughts on that.
To my mind, it sort of enhances how we're going to execute our strategic plan, but I'll refer back to the CAO for capacity issues. Do we have capacity to complete this project? And I'm not thinking within the next month or two. I'm thinking between now and Q4, the end of Q4, like over the next 6 months.
Yeah, that was absolutely going to be my first question. But the other thing to consider is this policy would have to be structured in a way, and it could be very easily, I think, to allow for that flexibility. We wouldn't be able to nail things down as rigid as perhaps some are thinking and keep it flexible. So it would be kind of a general term. Councilor Monkoff-Swain's connection to the strategic plan, they would definitely have to have that purpose attached to it. So we'd have to give some thought to what that looks like.
I'm thinking this is sort of a longer term discussion that council would have over many months and then craft the policy.
Yeah, no, I think, and I appreciate you providing context around it. I was interested on how you're going to explain this, just, you know, looking at a couple of lines on a piece of paper. But yeah, the fact that this is a long-term discussion, I think we all recognize that the need for it and the lack of availability of land for us. So yeah, I support the motion here and appreciate you bringing it forward. And that this the one tweak would be maybe to help administration to put some time frame around when we're expecting them to bring this back. But that was those are my comments, and thanks for bringing it forward.
Sure, I can make a friendly amendment to add to be discussion to be had during Q3 and Q4. Councillor Barnhart, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk. Not sure.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Sam, Councillor Monkoff-Swain, because I do think that was the one thing that was in my head. Is this the right time to be putting more energy into developing a strategy and putting more resources when we need our resources in the priority areas right now? So if we can minimize the the weight that this is going to put on the administration and come back with something in general terms or develop it later on in the year, I'm supportive of that. So I support your friendly amendment and appreciate the discussion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like the comments and I like the discussion so far. The one thing that I would add is that I'm unsure of some of the policies in the background for some regional partners, but I definitely have in my travels and visits to some of the other municipalities seen instances where strategies have been developed, and over periods of time, properties were acquired with an end goal in mind. Should it be building a new this or building a new that? So was at a economic development forum in Calgary before COVID hit earlier in the year, and there was conversation around making sure that you have all the pieces in place to be able to grow your community, and part of that is having the right land and stuff to do that. So if we can develop a policy that provides some guidance and rationale while remaining flexible to enable to get that done so that we can have the proper land to do things, I'm all supportive of that. So yeah, I thank you for bringing the motion forward, and the timeline towards the end of the year is good in my opinion, and yeah, I'm supportive of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we'll leave that motion as amended, with adding the discussion to be had over Q3 and completed in Q4. And I'll just take a quick nod to the CEO to make sure that's sufficient time, because that leaves them lots of time to plan based on COVID too. Are we good with that time frame, CEO?
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship. Yeah, we can pull something together for Q4, definitely.
Cool. Thank you very much. Any final comments on the motion? I still see 2 hands up, but people spoke. Okay, so all in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
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 Aye, and that motion carries as amended. Which brings us to item 8D, Beaumont Economic Development Recovery Plan. Or do we need to take 5? Because we've now been sitting for an hour and 15 minutes.
Take 5.
Take 5. Great, so I'll take a quick recess, take 5, and then come back. Okay, so call the meeting back to order, which brings us back to item 8D, Beaumont Economic Development Recovery Plan. I believe this is Mr. Mackin and team.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. So for today's agenda item, I'd like to first of all introduce the 2 speakers who are going to be leading us through this discussion. First, I'd like to introduce Angela Groneveld, who I will give a bit of background on, and then following Angela, Wendy Jones, our Economic Development Manager, will be providing the Beaumont Relaunch Plan framework. So Angela Groneveld, she's got an extensive history of small business ownership in Alberta and BC, but most specifically, she's one of only 3 economic recovery specialists in Canada, and that's accredited by the International Economic Development Council. Angela has worked as a renewal manager at the town of High River during the floods. She was part of the business development or business recovery team with Fort McMurray after the fires. And she's worked in a number of different high pressure, high stress events, such as what we are in right now, working with federal, provincial, municipal leaders in helping communities recover economically after such disasters. So we've been fortunate to be able to work with Angela in developing this framework and get a lot of her expertise and insight. And currently she's the Economic Development Officer in Okotos, just down Highway 2. So thank you, Angela, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to help us here in Beaumont, and also to share with Council some of your insight.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, Your Worship. Good afternoon, Council, and high up north up there. So I am very excited to serve this as one of your council today, because this is something that's very passionate to me as entrepreneurship myself. I've been an entrepreneur in Alberta for many years. My husband and I own a cattle ranch down south here. We've been affected ourselves and myself from man-made and natural disasters. I'm also the president for Business Retention Expansion International. We just had a great call this morning about different things that communities are doing. So I'm excited to dive into this, and you're going to feel my passion. You're going to feel a little bit of energy from this, but I hope it's in a positive way. And I'm glad that you're council that is committed to your business community. Rob, how would you like me to just start? I can't see the slides. Is that
no problem? I will just make sure. Shalane, would you like us to share the slides as well? I know that
I can too. I can pull it up and share if you'd like. I've got it.
Because we're streaming live to YouTube, somebody's got to have to share a screen on this. So.
Okay, I'll go. I got it.
Thank you very much for being here today and sharing your expertise with us. It's really appreciated.
You're welcome. Oh gosh, I don't have it pulled up. There we go. So can you guys see that?
Yep, it's coming back up.
The title page. Comparison of history, business, disaster recovery model. Do you see that slide?
Yes.
Okay. Trying to look how to make that full size. Anyways, we're just going to dive into it. This the training that I receive is from International Economic Development Corporation, and they have a memorandum of understanding with the economic developers of Alberta. So I am a trained facilitator through EDA, Economic Developers of Alberta, but our training comes from IEDC. The graph that you see in front of you is what is taught to us as trainer facilitators, that we use this in red. We use this as a normal recovery phases of recovery that a community would go through in a man-made or natural disaster. I've been serving in man-made and natural disasters on the ground with business owners for the past 6 years, unfortunately. It just never seems to go away. So what this is here today is co-created from 29 Degrees Institute and myself. She is also a business recoverist from Strategy for Economy that she's contributed to this. And we customized this to fit COVID. So this is a perspective for you to consider. What we are taught as trainers in this is that when the disaster happens, whether it's a fire or a flood, the impact of the disaster happens, and where you'll see the bottom of that impact is that's when you have the evacuation order. That is when you declare a state of emergency. And so we're going to use Fort McMurray and the Southern Alberta as the floods. Usually in 3 days is when the fire is either out within 72 hours or the flood has receded, and you are able to get into recovery phase. The business recovery initiatives and economy initiatives will run parallel to when an emergency happens in a community, because we've already have you pre-trained. You already know to hit the go button, and you have everything kind of parked aside. But so you'll do that parallel, and you don't move into the emergency operation center until the lives are saved, basically until you're welcome invited in. After the 72 hours, you then go into the hero phase that they call this, and this is recovery. So in High River, I served there for 6 years as a business renewal officer as a contract. And what we saw is when the flood went away, the government comes in, all levels of the government, we start to clean up, Red Cross shows up, all the different stakeholders that are part of recovery, all your business stakeholders, and the hero phase, everybody's recovering the community together. What happens in hero phase open also is when all the resources become available to the business community, and that's when they start making decisions of recovery for themselves in there. And a lot of them is loans. We're going to touch base on that later. And then what happens when the businesses are up and going, however long the recovery is they go into the honeymoon phase. What that is in High River is a lot of people were getting their insurance. A lot of people were replacing items in their home. And we did a lot of shop local campaigns. The government had given us recovery money, so we were able to bring in that traffic flow and everybody's shopping local. We did the same thing in Fort McMurray. There are 3 phases of recovery. Once the fires are out and they're built back up, the stores are going, the community starts to shop, and they are also bringing in events. I think they had a summer games or winter games or something. So we'll go after things like that to bring in traffic flow during the honeymoon phase. What happens after the honeymoon phase is the false economy. And this is what most business owners are not aware of. That false economy will crash and come down. This is when I call the second disaster happens of deferred loans the payments come due. And this is disaster number 2, because as the deferred payments start to come due, and the honeymoon phase is over, is usually then when the false economy is triggered and the business owner has all of the loans, all of the debt, and they don't have the revenue. When they were in the hero phase, they were so excited and they had access to everything when they were in an irrational, vulnerable state that they probably made some purchasing decisions of the supply and demand, or they made decisions on signing leases or doing leasehold improvements, or bringing on more staff or more products and services without doing a proper gap analysis. They were riding the wave. So when you see recovery and it goes up and down, this usually is about 3 to 5 years that this takes. And it all depends on the longevity of that recovery line, is based on how long you are in the impact of the disaster in the emergency state. So in High River, of course, it was quite long because the 90% of the community it took quite a while for the community to come back, and then the mold issues and stuff. Where High River, or in Fort McMurray, they were able to build back a little faster. So now the blue, I'm going to bring the COVID overlay on this. Nobody is not an expert in COVID recovery. All of our mentors, anyone in the world that is trained on this, nobody's gone through this. So we're a little nervous when we reach out to the ones that have been around for a long time, and they have, we're learning as we go here. And so we realize we have to get as much knowledge as we can to come up with some type of plan. Why? Is we have to put the business owner back in the driver's seat and for them to make decisions. So this is the perspective part that I'm going to present to you. This was adopted in Okotoks. It was tested through our Foothills Business Recovery Team, task force team that's made up of 1 MP and 3 MLAs and 7 different industries. And it was also tested through our local entrepreneur ecosystem and then our local council. And I've been asked to share it all over Alberta, actually all over Canada, some places in Canada, and that is how your economic development director found out about me through the GOA to ask me to present today, because there has been quite a bit of interest on this suppression level and time frame. So what I've done is broken it into 4 suppression levels. The first one was the date that I use is March 15th. That is the day that the schools were mandated to be closed. When schools were mandated to be closed, a lot of people had to make different decisions of their business at that time from a principal state. Do I stay home with my kids as a small mom and pop? Or if the schools aren't open, is it safe? And we started to see closures or restrictions happen then. Phase 2 then happened when the government started to announce restrictions that were happening on social distancing. That is when businesses were open, but they had to follow different rules to be able to be open. And as we were moving through those suppression levels is when I came to council with the Merge, Sustain and Recovery Plan. And I said to them, the next level will be as if the government starts to mandate closures. And then the next level after the mandated closures will be basically Italy. It's a complete lockdown of the community. So that is why you will be in an emergent stage until you have completed your suppression levels. When we presented this to council, literally 2 days later is when the first mandate came down that all non-essential businesses had to be mandated to be closed. So we moved that fast right into phase 3 of the suppression level. So the business owners were now in emergent need and they needed to lock down and sustain their business. And what we were saying to council is, what is your role in this? So we presented to them a plan so that they didn't duplicate the other services that federal and provincially being provided to them, or their local stakeholders that were providing to them. We worked closely with them to come together with a plan and then guide our council and ask for direction if they agreed with this. So we put a recovery plan together, which your team is presenting today, that fits into phase 1, 2, and 3, so that the business owners can start to make some plans on how to recover. Since that time, I didn't know. We were all wondering, are we going to go to a level 4? Will there be a lockdown? So when we educate our business owners on this phase, we're reminding them, right now, you are in emergent stage because you don't know if you're going to be hit again from another suppression level. So that means another impact to your business or your revenue. A lot of business owners were taking money to change their online shopping, increasing their website to curbside or to deliveries. And we wanted them to be frugal in making those decisions. Don't create a lot of debt because we have no idea how long you'll be in sustain mode. And we don't know if another level is coming. So all of those options that you're looking at making revenue could shut down, could stop. So we were trying to together educate with this plan that council had adopted to move forward with the business community. And the good news is, well, this is actually going to be my next slide, whether it's good news or not, is that when last Thursday, when the government announced at 3 o'clock that they were doing phase 1 relaunch of opening up. So that is the, do you want me to pause for a minute here, and do you have any comments or any questions on that?
I think Councillor Stoughton had a quick question.
I'm sorry, I couldn't unmute myself there. I was too many displays going on at once. Yeah, just a quick, if I may, just a quick question. What are we actually plotting on the Y, the vertical axis here?
What are we
Is that
plotting on the
economic
Y?
activity? Yes.
What are we plotting on the Y? I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Okay, on the graph that you show with the rise and fall
Okay,
and
yeah.
the curves there. So on the x-axis, the horizontal axis, you're plotting time, I assume. This is time after the incident, or the event, or whatever it is. What's being measured on the vertical axis, the y-axis? Is that economic activity or
Yes. Yeah, okay, I understand you now. So when this is taught to us, there's a lot of studies under the impact. There's a lot of studies that have been done by International Economic Development Corporation and by FEMA of why they come up with this recovery phase is because of the measurements that happened in the impact, the hero phase. So all I'm plotting out to you is that you understand the journey of a business community of what they'll go through when a disaster hits, the impact hits. So the measurements won't happen until you have the stats from your actual current situation. So if you would like to adopt this plan, you will then go back and look at your building permits, look at your data analytics, look at all the different types of data that contribute to your business community, and you can overlay it on top of this impact, hero phase, suppression level, and as the false economy. Right now, we call it the data analytics dashboard. And that's why it's important to have a start date so we can keep track of these businesses, which industries, all of that stuff. And it is discussed later in the plan that is being presented to you. But this is just a graph for you to understand the language of what they're going to go through.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we can continue.
Okay, so what I wanted to just leave with you, understanding what they're going through. There's a few, because of COVID, this has never been done before, this type of disaster. There's a few things that I'm also a business coach. I worked for the government of Alberta Business Link. Southern Alberta was my territory. And the business disaster recovery coach hat, I'm going to talk a little bit here. The government has decided that we should be phase one relaunch should be open. It does not mean some municipalities are considering this, whether they would, what their own autonomy is in their community, what they would like, but business owners are also need to be asking themselves this. There is some surveys that have been done out there that we have heard recently, even in Canmore. They shared their results that I think it was 40 or 50% of the citizens will not utilize the relaunch of the business owners in phase one. So there's a principal decision that business owners need to make right now. Just because the government has said it's okay to open under these guidelines, do you really want to open? Do you want to incur the expense? There's also a lot of it. The government came out and they said, these essential businesses, you can open. And they actually yesterday announced a workbook and a guidebook. My business coach hat, that said, here you go. Here's how to do it. Good luck. These entrepreneurs have never done this before, and this costs them a lot of money to now that they've got to go out and figure this out. They've got to market it to their community, and time is money for them. And they're doing all of this with money out and not knowing, are my customers going to come in? And I know that because I'm watching other communities that are surveying and getting that data. So that is something that I think you need to consider is not all businesses are going to open right now. And we need to encourage them that that is okay. Just that the government has said it doesn't mean you have to, but what do you need? What is our local government role is a question that you could ask them to help them move through that together. And be cautious of the debt that you take on, because we never know if another suppression level is going to come down. I love that the government of Alberta has a lot of regional discussions with us as regional EDOs that they try to give us updates of and they're straight up honest about it. We don't know. It's all, they've got a measurement that they're using that they're be prepared and prepare your business community that if this curve doesn't flatten or the hospitals can't handle it, we don't know what the measurements are, but it could come down as another suppression level. The other thing, as you understand, as we're asking these business owners, loans are not the answer. I cannot reiterate it. So there's other ways that you can be helping them, reaching out to them. Corporate social responsibility is a big key item right now. This is a long game of recovery. We also know that the economy is not going to be the same. So that means not a lot of disposable money is going to be available. And when I look at your tax ratio, and I look at the small mom and pops that are in there, if people are tight with their paychecks and they're going to be buying items that they need versus that they want. And that is why these business owners under that false economy need to be really cautious. And as a government level, I would ask you to consider that when you defer any initiatives that you put forward to support them too. Return on investment and impact. What can we do as as a local government, or what can to stimulate the economy? One of the things that we are bringing forward is to take a look at your capital projects, but take a look at them with the business lens of return on investment and return on impact. I heard you guys earlier listening to your live talk about how you wanted to shift your tax ratio, and that one counselor spoke to it being a positive thing to buying land. I see you today accepting a presentation coming forward to your business community to recover them. These are all signs that you're open for business and that you're dedicated to it. So really taking a look at those capital projects to align which ones are making an impact on the economy, and in the investment of taxpayers' dollars or ratepayers' dollars towards those, is there an economic return on it? Those are the questions that we have asked our council and that we are teaching. This is the time to have those conversations. So that's it, just a little high level. I'm so happy to see that you guys are dedicated to supporting your business community to recover. It's really nice to see some councils do that. So hats off to you guys for doing that. And if you have any questions, I'm going to stay on as the rest of the presentation, or if you have any right now.
I see none, so we'll just continue on with the presentation as we're going.
Okay.
Thank you, Angela. And we'll flip the share screen right now so that we'll have it on this end. Thank you, Lauren. And Council, I'd like to now introduce Wendy Jones, the Manager of Economic Development. Some of you have met her in person, but So those of you that haven't, Wendy started just 2 weeks prior to COVID happening. So there wasn't a long period of time here while she was accessible and in front of council. But I'd like to turn it over to Wendy now to walk through our relaunch framework.
Thanks, Rob. Hello, worship and mayor and council. I'd like to first of all define that we have gone with a COVID-19 business relaunch framework. We have not defined it as a strategy at this point, and as I continue to talk through the PowerPoint, we'll bring that picture together for you. So one of the things that we thought was interesting as we started to build through our framework is that Alberta recognized that it's faced many challenges. It was kind of interesting to realize that how much we have gone through, as identified by Premier Jason Kenney's message, in that our fight for control of natural resources, 2 work wars, boom and bust economic cycles, and yet our own council goes on to recognize that Beaumont seeks collaborative, responsive, and innovative ways to maintain and grow a highly desirable and living community with invest and drive into local projects that offer positive economic prosperity. And it lends well to exactly where our conversations have been going and where we need to go. The business relaunch framework is really based on the province's relaunch strategy and the Alberta Health Services guidelines. Those are front and center to driving what we're doing and how we're developing our framework. It's been purposely developed as a framework plan so that we can continually move through with the province and Alberta Health Services guidelines through the 3 relaunch stages that are defined by the province. We want to adopt and communicate best practices to remain healthy through this process. We want to continually assess the pulse of the business community. We want to develop and deliver mechanisms that will support the business community. And that's what we're really looking for, is when we look to develop those mechanisms, that really becomes our strategic actions and stuff going forward. We want to plan ahead, but we want to continually remain fluid through these unprecedented times. We're a strong community, we're a loyal community, and it's together we will get through this. We have been continually talking to our business community from the onset of March 16th. And every day we hear new messages, we hear new concerns. And as some of the province and the Alberta Health Services guidelines come out, more questions get raised on what they're supposed to do next. And so economic development has played a key role in hearing that and listening. Our business community, next slide please. Our business community, as you well know, is based primarily on home-based businesses, 331. We've got 177 storefronts, and we've got the 57 contractor services. So we're looking at 671 active businesses, taking into consideration the non-resident business licenses received and the other. So very strong home-based community to work with, along with our storefronts to focus on in this recovery. As you know, next slide, please. The province set out there's 3 stages for the relaunch strategy. Stage 1 as early as May 14th. And with the continual updates and whatnots that happen daily that we hear through the EOC and the province's announcements, we know that we're getting another announcement this afternoon. So some of our challenges are things, the initiatives we've set out, some of the things we're setting to go talk to our businesses about, either get answered and or we're still asking more questions to be able to get the support and needs out there. So as the province continues to release information, that definitely helps and supports our initiatives, but it also can affect the impact of what we were strategically planning to do, which reminds us to remain fluid so that we can be flexible. The health indicators are key through all the stages, and that is massive. Everything we work on, if the health indicators change in a week, 2 weeks from now, everything we thought we were doing today could turn on a dime. In moving forward, we've also identified our business relaunch framework. This is Beaumont's business relaunch framework. We've identified it in 4 stages. crisis response, stabilization, recovery and resilience, and the new norm. And what we've also identified and want to point out is that our Beaumont businesses are not going to move through recovery at the same time. It is going to be at different stages for different types of businesses. So as we move forward, some may be still in a crisis response, some will be in stabilization. And our objective and goal is to be able to continually learn and pass the information along that some of those businesses that will be in stabilization earlier are learning what they're facing and being able to use that information to help guide our other businesses through this process. So as a community, we're staying strong, we're learning from each other, and our business community is supporting each other to come out of this in the best we can. Our key is to listen. Without listening, we won't be able to assess and adapt to provide the necessary support. So what in this launch framework here, it's a very high level. And what you see is the wording continually identifying gaps and needs. We're constantly doing that, developing actions and implementation, looking at what cross-promotional opportunities there are, how we can collaborate with the Chamber of Commerce, who's come to the table, we're partners, we're making sure that our messaging is the same. And that's some of the struggles that you see in the crisis is you can go to one website, you go to another website, then somebody has another idea and says, oh, did you look at that website? To a business owner, it's overwhelming. They're still trying to figure out if they can even open their front door, let alone if they're operating safely. So they're looking at their immediate day-to-day needs to respond to with staff and all of these messages. So we worked really hard to create one place to go to between the Beaumont Chamber's website and the town of Beaumont, City of Beaumont, my apologies, website. Next slide. So when we look at the crisis response, we want to kind of share with council what we have done to date. So there's been active engagement, as I discussed earlier, with local business landlords, regional peers groups. We've done the dedicated COVID-19 City of Beaumont website as a municipality and included the provincial and federal supports. There's that health and safety concerns. Many of our administration are in constant contact with Alberta Health Services on a daily basis, asking questions, getting clarification, and sharing it with who we need to share it with and getting it onto our website as we learn more. Going forward, there was a lot about the physical distancing measures, and we started to see some of our social media light up in terms of people being concerned when they were at certain stores and things like that about their own safety and how to maneuver in a store and stay safe and how many people are allowed to stay in a store and all of that great stuff. So we provided the decals and stuff to help with that safety, to help relieve some of that pressure from the stores. When we were hearing negativity, we personally went and talked to the owner or manager of that store to say, this is how we'd like to help you. Here's some more information that we have that can maybe take some of that pressure off that you're hearing on social media. And then we went into launching the Open in Beaumont campaign. And the energy that went into the campaign itself identified 100+ surveys. Within the first 2 weeks, 100+ surveys were done. On top of the 100+ surveys, there was probably another 75 calls minimum to just find out, follow up, confirm, and have a little bit more discussion with our business community. And so when we launched the campaign, there was great energy put into it, and we received great energy back, obviously, from the numbers with 20,000 impressions on social media and the feedback that we received, the videos going up. And at the end of the day, it started creating some really good open dialogue. And so our community is responding to it. in positive ways, and we're going to look to use the Open in Beaumont campaign to continue to launch next steps. So as we go forward, what we've been hearing most of late is the concern about the PPE that's needed for reopening for those businesses that may be choosing to reopen. And as of yesterday, there was another piece of information that was shared with us that gives access to our businesses, just let them know where they can purchase some of these supplies. But the day before that, nobody knew where to go and how to go. So that's how quickly the information is changing, how fast it comes in, and what we have to go out with. So as we go into our next slide, stabilization, this is where we're looking at introducing in building our next campaign phase, and some of the things that we're looking at doing. With this businesses opening up 50%, at half capacity, the eating areas and things like that, there's some businesses we're hearing aren't comfortable with that. So we're looking at doing the pop-up mobiles. And that's some work we're doing an investigation right now in terms of using empty parking lots to safely develop in our community socializing again and introducing them in a safe way. And so as these initiatives are built, we're going to look at providing the educational opportunities to our businesses. We're reaching out to some of the Beaumont Chamber and the Community Futures and groups like that to build relationships that can perhaps start doing Zoom educational talks with our business community to tell them how best to manage their business going forward. So there's lots of good advice out there. For us, it's bringing it together so that our community can drill in on that and get those learnings and put them into practice and see what starts working. And we want council to support and participate in a working group. And I know right now there's a whole lot of language about task force groups or different things that may be happening in different communities. And what we're hearing is our business leaders and a lot of our business community have gone into being hands-on with their business operations. So some of those individuals that have stepped up and beyond to help provide leadership in those types of settings before, right now might be handing you that cup of coffee because that's what they got to do to maintain their business operations. So what we want to do is introduce this first as having council participate as a working group with us. And so as we develop these tactics and initiatives, we'll work on coming back to you on a schedule as needed, but for sure every 2 weeks, identifying what the next stage of initiatives look like, what we're getting ready to launch, how one can participate, what council feels is the right pulse for our community based on what you hear. And perhaps there's some of those sensitive issues in terms of that are going out in terms of what rents are like, what talking to landlords, supporting that kind of a conversation, because we want our businesses to come through this as strong as possible. But sometimes we need that support from you to be able to reach in and hear some of that sensitive information that they're willing to share on a one-to-one with an elected official to say, this is what's going to work for our community, but this isn't what it isn't going to work. So as we go forward, that's what we're looking for, is to see if council will participate as a working group. And as we come forward with objectives every couple of weeks for specific tasks on that. At the end, we get to the recovery and resilience. And right now, again, that goes to lending to the gaps and the needs, but very specifically here, we really want to start focusing on attracting new business and spending in Beaumont. What day this is, what week this is, what month this is, all depends on how our health and the province goes forward in terms of releasing and us getting back to what we are going to look at next is the new norm. So through this, we'll continue to expand and work on building that new norm, but we really got to focus here on that new business attraction and what's there. Our developers we know are out there, they're working on things. connecting with them and working as a team between administration and those parties to say, what can we do here? And how can we start building on that? The new norm, to be determined. We will get a better feel of maybe what the new norm looks like as we start coming through this. But right now, we really don't know what the new norm looks like. We've got potentially ideas. We hear of things that are happening in other countries. We can adopt some of those things that we're hearing, great. We just got to make sure it fits for Beaumont. Ideas are great. We got to vet them, we got to adjust them, and we got to make them work for our community. So at the end of the day, we want to come back, and Angela talked about this earlier to a council question. And it's, if you want to come back and figure out how you did through this, we want to look at the quantitative and qualitative measures. It's the health and the safety impacts. What happened in that time? So we've got communication, marketing, economic impact, and what's happening with those various different things and how we work through that. So will this end up developing into a tracking document that identifies strategic initiatives and actions? Absolutely. But they can change daily and based on what the province and Alberta Health Services are able to guide us with. And that's going day to day, week to week, and we will get there. So that's what our framework is driving us to do, is to remain active, actionable, listen to our business, and provide the supports, but be nimble in it. Be nimble in the way we do it. Everything we might plan to do for tomorrow, today, might change, and we have to rethink it. So that's, we hope you can appreciate where we're going with this. We hope it gives you some insight into how we continue to work through this from an economic standpoint. And at this point, I'll take any questions.
Appreciate that. It's been a great document. And so the discussion before us is that council endorsed the Beaumont COVID-19 business relaunch framework and participate as a working group in the execution of the strategic initiatives. And so I'll make that motion and open it up for questions and comments from members of council. Being none. Councillor Barnhart.
I couldn't let it pass without asking one question, but I know we're not wanting to belabor this because it's all excellent. I'm really pleased to see the thought that's gone into this and the expertise. But I do have one question about the working group. Is it too soon to ask? Is there any kind of terms of reference? How often you're going to meet? That kind of thing? How many groups you're going to involve? Are you working on that, and when will we see that?
So in about a couple of weeks, we'll be bringing back to council some of the initial actions and strategies that we see. If it's determined then that it's felt better, we need to have that terms of reference, we can look at building some of that. Some of the terms of reference might just be specific to the actual strategy. So I would be concerned about for us to be nimble in terms of putting an overarching document around everything that we're trying to do.
Just a follow-up, if I may, Worship. I don't expect to have details on all of that, but I think just in general terms, how often the meetings, what they're going to be, what's the purpose, just something, one pager, I think is all that I would see needed.
Absolutely. No problem. Yeah, we can deliver that.
Okay. Further comments or questions from members of council? No. All right. So just before I call the question, I think thank you very much for putting all the time and effort into putting this relaunch strategy back together. I mean, I think it's really important for our community that we have some plan in mind to be able to help our community as it relaunches and we move through this COVID-19 crisis. This is literally one of the worst disasters this country has ever faced in terms of public health and economics. And so this is going to give our community and our council an opportunity to show real leadership and get our community through this process. So hearing that, or seeing no further requests to speak, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Fair enough. Okay, so moving to, we have no bylaws. Councillor inquiries and reports. Start with inquiries. Is there questions from members of council? Councilman Newkirk?
Yeah, you betcha. Thank you. Just a quick question for administration for the CAO. Just wondering if we could get a quick update on the 80 acres project that was approved.
Yes, thank you very much, Councilman Newkirk. I will defer that to Mr. Suter, who is just on my left.
Thank you.
Thank you for your worship to Councilor Van Newkirk. Yeah, we're looking at that project. I'm going to bring something to council here shortly, I hope, as some concepts. We've been talking about carving off a piece of the 80 acres that we would create some parking, some access, obviously off of the road, and fence an area. And then we could look at some scenarios where we could look at potentially some dog off leash area, some open space, as well as what else might fit in that piece. The leasee is going to continue to farm the remainder for this season. And as soon as I've got some concepts, I'll bring that back.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Second question, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed through our social media today that 52nd Ave was closed in front of the fire hall to get some emergency repair done on the sewer, I believe it said. And then that got me thinking about the emergency repairs we're doing on 510 as well. And one of the line items we've included in one of the commissions that I'm part of is actually a line item for emergency repairs. And I couldn't recall if in our budgeting we have a line item in our budget to deal with emergency type repairs. So my question, I don't know if you have the answer right away on that one or not, but if you know offhand, that'd be great. And if not, should we? So thank you.
I'll take that. Yes, I'll answer that, Councilor Newkirk, the rest of council. Currently we do not have a line item for emergency repairs. What we will do is come back to council for these last 2 5-10 repairs, and we've been dealing with them on a one-off. Sometimes these repairs are covered by insurance. In this case, neither of these ones are. So we will roll up what we have spent, and I had brief council on the estimates, and if we cannot find it within current operating, then we will come back to council for funding.
Thank you for that update. And obviously it's top of mind for you guys, and an emergency thing just needs to be dealt with, and then we have to figure out how to fund it on our end. So that's all for me, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further requests, we'll move on to the CAO. Or does members of council wish to make a statement today? Okay, moving on to the CAO.
Okay, I'll pass on a couple things as far as updates. One is 510. 510 will be opened up later today. We're going to remove the detour signs, but the bulk of the signage won't be removed until tomorrow morning, but we will get that road up and running. We had established an initial repair budget of about $118,000, which I mentioned to council last week. We were able to get the culvert in and the bulk of the repairs done with some savings to that 118, but made a 1 foot in jail's decision to continue to spend it and do some more repairs. So we were able to do about $20,000 more repairs, and that would be milling and filling. So that road should be in decent shape, and we continue to monitor for heavy traffic. Street sweeping is completed with the exception of 2 areas. We need to get some signage out, and that will occur and to be completed by Thursday. The 2 areas are Ruling Block from 53rd Avenue to 50th Avenue and the Ring Road from 50th Avenue to 48th Street in the southeast quadrant. So that we'll have that wrapped up here right away. I was able to get an answer on transit. Transit is 2 to 3 days to get the buses back up and running, but you'll love this. 2 to 3 weeks to upload the ETS website, and we've resumed our operation. So while we all love to struggle with some of our systems, it's good to know that others do as well.
Shocking.
Just a couple other comments, and then I'll stop here. COVID-19, one of the things we briefed coming out of the ECC yesterday, we briefed our staff is we did some research as we're doing every day into pandemics, and came across an article that talked about how pandemics typically end. And it was interesting that there's what they term a medical ending, where the cases start to plummet. And then there's another term they term the social end, where people are no longer afraid of the virus and they feel that it's their right to return to their normal or their regular lives. I think we're seeing a combination of both of those things right now, probably mostly driven by social. And in this article we read, it said the social will take over before the medical, with very few exceptions. Spanish flu was one of those exceptions. So we're starting to see that the people have just had enough. But that said, on the medical side, there's some pretty encouraging numbers that I just wanted to share that Dr. Henshaw shared yesterday. A week ago, Alberta was in a position where we had 50.4% of our cases had recovered. We had 12 patients in intensive care, and on that day, 70 additional cases were announced. So that was a week ago. Yesterday, Monday, we are now up at 73.9% recovery in Alberta. That's a pretty significant jump. There's currently, yesterday was announced, 73 new cases with 12 in intensive care units. So while the social end is putting the pressure on to reopen relaunch our communities and certainly try to salvage the economy, the medical numbers are supporting that as well. And as Wendy talked about in the presentation, we watch this every day. So just I say this more for the edification of the public who are watching this, that there's a lot of things in motion, but we're going in the right direction. And a lot of that has been driven by, and I continue to urge people to abide by the physical distancing and all of the other health measures that are in place. We've seen ME, as our municipal enforcement, is seeing a lot of very creative ways to get around the physical distancing. And people, we've got to be smarter than that. We've got to bear down and hang in there, even though we are patient. That said, the city of Beaumont, in my opinion, has done a remarkable job. We had one case. That person recovered without any further spread, so there was no community spread. Whether that was luck or circumstance means nothing. It means that the efforts that people are making are paying off. So that's all I wanted to add as far as an update. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have no correspondence. Are there any members of council wishing to make a notice of motion today? Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, no notice of motion, sorry. I missed an update that I wanted to give council and the public. Just a little happy note. Our block hosted a street concert last week with a fellow named Martin Kerr. He's an artist out of Edmonton, and it was very, very well received, and everyone was out on their driveways, and we had a few raindrops at the end, but it was a lot of fun, and it was really uplifting to see your neighbors again, rather than just wave awkwardly in a vehicle as they're trying to go somewhere and maybe wearing masks or gloves. So it was really good, and just wanted to share that with council and the public. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hendricks.
Yeah, just on the notice of motion, I'd like to provide this notice of motion that the City of Beaumont review the current overland drainage design located on the northwest corner of Range Road 243 and Highway 625. The purpose of the review would be to mitigate the spring flooding that currently affects the landowner to the north of this location. And I could send this as an email to Shalane, Mrs. Winter.
Okay, we'll accept that notice of motion.
Thank you.
That way, that'd be great.
Okay.
Seeing no others, can I get a motion to move into closed session? Councillor Van Newkirk moves. All in favor?
Aye.
That carries unanimously. All right, so we'll move into closed session. All right, so thank you very much. Just to the members of the public that are still tuned in. We just came out of camera. There is no business or motions arising from the discussion that council had in the in-camera session or the closed session. And so at this point, I'd like to thank you all for being here and sticking with us today. And we'll adjourn the meeting and see you all at the committee of the whole next week.